And, and that's what he did when he came into power when he won the elections, completely on jingoistic, anti-Pakistan rhetoric. He then, when he came into power, I mean, that's when he clamped down on Kashmir. Kashmir is a disputed territory between Pakistan and India since 1948, 47. And the United Nations Security Council resolutions, which clearly state that the people of Kashmir were going to be allowed to decide their own destiny through a referendum, through a plebiscite. That plebiscite never took place. India never allowed that to happen because clearly they realized that any plebiscite, because it was a Muslim majority province, they would want to come to Pakistan. Hence, they did not allow that to happen. But there was always, Kashmir had this special status because of the UN Security Council resolution. But 5th August 2019, Narendra Modi did away with that article, that special article which gave Kashmir that special status, Article 370, and just got rid of the special status. But not only that, he is now subsequently trying to change the demography of Kashmir by settling outsiders, Hindus coming into Kashmir, settling them there so that the demography would be changed, so that if in future there is a referendum or a plebiscite, the majority would be Hindus.
Now, Prime Minister, there are well-documented facts that the Indian military is committing atrocities in Kashmir. Now, what I would like to ask you here is, yes, Pakistan is raising its voice on international platforms, in the UN. There are multiple United Nations Security Council resolutions regarding Kashmir, and India right now is in defiance of all those resolutions and international law as well. But what has been the progress on the ground? Kashmiris are still under siege. It's been more than 500 days. Many have lost their lives.
Yeah, what India has done in Kashmir is that a population of 8 million Kashmiris now is under siege from 800,000 Indian troops in the valley. And there are almost daily news of stage encounters where they kill Kashmiri people, Kashmiri youth. Thousands have been whisked away from Kashmir, teenagers. All their senior leadership is more or less in prisons or house arrest. And so in these circumstances, unfortunately, the world has not really, there have been talks. The United Nations Security Council has spoken about it 3 times.
But they have not produced any result.
But that's it. Sadly, nothing concrete is happening. And sadly also because the United States and Western countries somehow see India as a bulwark against China. You know, they want to build up India as a counterbalance to China, which I think is a huge mistake. Because, you know, they are then, as always happens when you want an ally and you need an ally, then you just, the Western world just does not worry about their human rights abuses. This always happens.
Prime Minister, do you think Pakistan needs to deal with the Kashmir issue differently now?
What can Pakistan do? Apart from, obviously, the war is never an option between 2 nuclear-armed countries. So if war is not an option, what else can we do? Approach international forums, which we have done. We have been speaking about it in the United Nations. We are also contemplating lawfare, in other words, use law to fight our case on Kashmir. But I think Kashmir is an issue which, in my opinion, like the Palestinian issue, is not going to go away if the world thinks that it's just suddenly these people will disappear in thin air. It's not going to happen. This will go on. And in my opinion, by Narendra Modi taking this extreme step, which he has done, by depriving them of their special status, he's basically pushed Kashmir to a point where there are hardly any pro-Indian Kashmiris left. Because previously there were political parties that were pro-India. Today, if there is a free and fair election in India, the sort of oppression that has taken place in Kashmir since 5th August, they pushed the Kashmiris to a point where no political party in Kashmir will survive which is pro-India.
Now, Prime Minister, as you know, President-elect Joe Biden will assume office in a matter of few more weeks from now. What are your expectations from his administration with regards to the Kashmir issue?
It's very difficult to say. I have no idea really how the Biden administration will behave. We will, of course, I spoke to President Trump and, twice I spoke to him and he did offer to mediate between Pakistan and India on Kashmir. But obviously Indians stonewalled it. Let's see, we will again try with the Biden administration. Let's see, we'll try our best.
Now, again, talking about US-Pakistan relations, how do you see the future of relationship between these two countries under President-elect Biden?
Again, difficult to predict what will happen, but what I can say is that we want the US to be even-handed between Pakistan and India. That's all we want. What we do not want is what is happening right now, where India is supposed to be this big ally of the Western countries against China. And I don't understand why there has to be this rivalry with China to a point where you need to have allies so that, they counterbalance China. I do not understand this anyway, but I think that this policy is difficult for Pakistan because then the whole thing gets lopsided. India is favored. Pakistan's legitimate rights are ignored. Although Pakistan has, if you look back in the past, Pakistan has given huge sacrifices for United States. We became their partner, frontline state in the Afghan jihad. And after the jihad was over, the US abandoned Pakistan. In fact, slapped sanctions on us. And Pakistan was left with the baby, which meant we had these sectarian groups, we had militant groups in Pakistan, which later on the same US blamed Pakistan for these militant groups. These same militant groups were Mujahideen, helped by the US, by the CIA, helped Pakistan, financing them to fight the Soviets. But once they left in '89, the Soviets left, the US abandoned us, we were left with these groups. And same groups come 2001, 9/11. Pakistan then was asked to take on the same groups which had been indoctrinated in jihad, which meant foreign occupation. So when the Soviets had invaded Afghanistan, fighting the Soviets the Mujahideen they were heroes. But when the same people turned against the US, when they occupied Afghanistan, they became terrorists. And Pakistan's job was to take care of these terrorists. We paid a huge price for that. Pakistan lost 70,000 people in that. We had suicide attacks going on, insider attacks in Pakistan. So the country suffered. Really, we should have stayed neutral because once we had created these groups who were indoctrinated in jihad, then come a decade later, after 9/11, then we then were these groups now were terrorists. So Pakistan got stuck in the middle, and we paid a heavy price. And so all we want is that there should be a balance between Pakistan and India as far as the US is concerned. That's really, if you ask me what would we want from the Biden administration, that's what would we want.
Okay, now, Prime Minister, moving forward, over the past few months, many countries, especially many Arab countries, have normalized their ties with Israel. Does Pakistan have any such plans?
Look, every country has its own foreign policy, its own interests. So, who am I to comment on whatever they want to do with their foreign policy? But Pakistan, there are two reasons why Pakistan cannot recognize Israel. Number one, the situation in Kashmir is exactly the same situation of Palestine. So if we recognize Israel's takeover of the Palestinian territories, then we also have to recognize what India has done in Kashmir. So number one, that's where we completely lose all moral standing if we are to talk about Kashmir and not about Palestine. Secondly, and much more importantly, the founder of our country was the one and the only great leader for me. And he's the one who people love and respect in this country, and that was Quaid-e-Azam, Muhammad Ali Jinnah. Very early he stated the policy of Pakistan about Israel. And that policy is simple, that unless the injustice done to the people of Palestine is removed, unless the people of Palestine are given their just settlement in a homeland, we cannot recognize Israel. So this is really Pakistan's stated policy.
Prime Minister, do you think this whole topic of normalizing ties with Israel has damaged Pakistan's relationship with some Arab countries?
No, as far as I know, it hasn't, because no one has put any pressure on me, and no one can put any pressure on me, because Pakistan is a democratic country. And if you do a referendum in Pakistan, you will know where the people of Pakistan stand. So there's an emotional attachment of people of Pakistan with what is happening to the people of Palestine, just as they stand with the people of Kashmir. So this emotional attachment with their cause means that anyone in this country who's a democratic leader, if he decides to recognize Israel, he would be going against the will of the people of this country.
Now, Prime Minister, let's talk about the coronavirus pandemic. The way Pakistan handled this pandemic has been praised across the world. How did you do that? Number one. And do you think Pakistan is lagging behind when it comes to vaccines against COVID-19?
Well, the reason we handle it better than other countries is because we realized, that Pakistan's situation was different to the Western countries and to China. Because you see, it spread from Wuhan city in China, and then it went to Europe and the US. And as it was unfolding in Europe, the measures taken by the European countries and the United States and also China, I quickly realized that we do not have the same situation as those countries. And we could not take this similar measures that these countries were taking, because these were rich countries. And even despite being rich countries, I mean, the people in those countries suffered and are suffering today. But in our country, if I impose the sort of lockdown, which for instance is right now imposed in England, or in certain European countries right now, or say in California in the United States, we have a large part of a workforce, almost 80%, which is in the informal economy. So, and then we have these daily wages or weekly wages who go and work on a daily basis or a weekly basis to feed their families. And we do not have that sort of social security where we could tell people to be locked down in your houses and then be able to give them money or provide them food. Unfortunately, we do not have the situation, at least right now. So therefore, I took this decision of a smart lockdown. We then had quickly formed a control and command room, and we started gathering data of where were the hotspots, where this virus was spreading. And we then concentrated on those hotspots, and we used to lock them down. So we did not, for 2 weeks we locked down the whole country because the provinces, everyone sort of panicked, and sort of the provinces started locking down, especially the province of Sindh, where they really suffered because he completely locked down his province. And I couldn't do anything because he comes from the opposition party, the chief minister there. But after 2 weeks, I insisted on them opening up our economy. And starting with agriculture, we We knew that if the supply lines from our agriculture sector, if they were disturbed, people would be starving in the cities. So we opened up all the supply lines, did not affect agriculture sector, and then opened up construction very quickly. And construction is what employs most people in the cities. So those two moves really helped us from going through what other countries, like for instance, India, what it is going through right now. We saved our people from crushing poverty by actually taking this decision of a partial lockdown. And actually it became more successful. Because when you lock down a whole country where there is a high level of poverty, you cannot impose that lockdown. It's not sustainable. Because you cannot lock down hungry people. So that's what happened in India. They tried to lock down hungry people, and there was no lockdown. So in India took a huge battering. I mean, we hardly, we were very lucky. We did not lose that many people compared to all our neighbors.
And what about a vaccine against COVID-19?
Well, we are in touch with the Chinese, and we hope to start vaccinating. Obviously we cannot afford, 220 million people, but the vulnerable sectors of our society we hope to vaccinate first, which is our doctors and nurses, the frontline workers in the health sector, and then over 60 people.
Will you take a vaccine against COVID-19?
Well, I'll wait for others to take it first.
Okay. Now, Prime Minister, let's talk about the relationship between Turkey and Pakistan. Certainly, these two countries are not neighbors. They don't share a border, but they are neighbors by heart. But which areas of cooperation between these two countries can be improved under your leadership and under President Erdogan's?
Well, let me say, there's a historical background to relationship between Pakistan and Turkey. And the historical background is that Turks ruled what is now the whole of Pakistan and India. They ruled that for almost 700 years. 600 years. And, so Urdu, the language which is spoken in our national language, is littered with Turkish words, because it was, the Turks were really in power here, and the court language Urdu was influenced by Turkish. So, and then there was this one peculiar instance when the Khilafat movement started in Pakistan, when Turkey was being attacked by European forces and it was fighting for its survival. Then people in what is now Pakistan gathered a lot of money and tried to, raise funds for Turkey to fight for its independence in the 20s or early 1920s. So there is a historical linkage between the two countries. But my relationship with Prime Minister Erdogan is based on common values. We believe, both of us believe in this awful that we should do something about Islamophobia. We can never forget the support and help which Turkey has given us in Kashmir, because sadly most of the Muslim countries did not come forward, but Turkey and Malaysia under Mahathir Mohamad really went on a limb to support us after 5th August 2019, when India had laid siege on the valley of Kashmir. So, so our relationship is based on common values and, of course, our historic connections with Turkey. And then, future trade prospects. Pakistan is a country of 220 million people. And, the moment we get ourselves organized, this country has great potential of growing. So trade is one of the things which we hope to increase with Turkey.
Now, Prime Minister, you have praised President Erdogan's stance on the Kashmir issue and the causes that Pakistan and Turkey share. How do you find him as a leader?
I think, in my opinion, after Mahathir Mohamad, who I used to, because they transformed their societies. Mahathir Mohamad transformed Malaysia. I believe their per capita was about $600 when Mahathir Mohamad took over, and when he left it was $9,000. So the hallmark of a statesman is that he transforms a society. And that's what President Erdogan has done. Because we know the state of Turkey, very similar to our state right now, when he took over. And, Turkey has become a formidable country since then. Every country goes through cycles. It has to happen. But, on the whole, if you look at the trajectory of Turkey since President Erdogan took over, Turkey has just become a force.
Now, Prime Minister Khan, my last question to you. As a dog dad myself, how are your dogs?
I can't spend as much time because, I live on a farm basically, and I've always grown up with animals, farm animals, and dogs, of course, are part of farm, very much part of a farm because they, when you have farm animals. But unfortunately, since I've been in government, I haven't been able to give my farm, my animals as much time.
How many are there, by the way?
I have, chicken, goats. I used to have cows and buffaloes, but I have given them away. I only have goats now and chicken, peacocks. I have 4 dogs.
Prime Minister Imran Khan, thank you very much for talking to us on A News.
Pleasure.